A common thread on this show this year has been the push and pull of finding the right tools while also balancing our time and money as solopreneurs. A while back, I invited my friend and fellow podcaster, Sarah St. John, onto the show. She's the host of the Frugalpreneur podcast, and at first I thought we would just share podcast war stories. But then, and thankfully before we started recording, everything went wrong. We were having both hardware and software issues. I was helping Sarah through some issues that she was unfamiliar with. So once we got everything squared away, I thought we could refocus our conversation. See, I have a tech background, and sometimes I forget that troubleshooting and working with technology isn't everyone's cup of tea. So we decided to dive deep into managing our tech stacks and managing your tech stack without spending a fortune. We share our top tips and personal experiences on how to choose the right tools, avoid unnecessary expenses, and leverage platforms like AppSumo for amazing lifetime deals. And I've always been kind of questionable on AppSumo, but the last few deals I bought, I use every day. So whether you're a tech newbie or a seasoned pro, I think this episode is packed with actionable advice. You know I love actionable advice to help you streamline your business operations and save money. I want you to look for these top takeaways. You should evaluate your current tools by regularly checking if your tools are still meeting your needs. You should consider the cost of switching, weigh the benefits of switching tools against the effort required, and balance convenience and cost. You should ensure the cost of the tool is justified by its value. We talk a lot about jobs to be done, interestingly enough. We bring that up again in this episode, and the fact that you're kind of hiring an app to do something. So I think this episode is going to be exciting. It's a pretty raw interview, to be honest with you. Not something I often do, but we were just kind of talking through some of the tools we use, our philosophies and things like that. Now, this also marks another change in the show and the way I'm doing the members only interviews. So if you are not a member, you are getting shorter interviews and you're getting ad-supported interviews. If you become a member over at streamlined.fm/join, you are going to get a whole extra 25 to 30 minutes. And so I want to get into the main show because I think it's really good, but I want to tell you how I've kind of changed this a little bit. Previously, the members only version was an extra 10 minutes at the end, just like some footnote that we didn't hit on in the main show. But I want to deliver more value for the members. And so, as well as the ad-supported show. So I've shortened up the ad-supported show to be tighter. So in 30 minutes, less than 35 definitely, you'll get the same amount of value that you were getting in 50 minutes, right? And then if you're a member, you'll hear more of an unstructured conversation where there will certainly be more nuggets of information, things that we didn't think to talk about in the main show, and you'll get that ad-free. So that's changing as of today. I hope you like the format. If you're not a member, you can head over to streamlined.fm/join. You can also get all of the show notes for this episode, and there are going to be a lot naturally because we talked about tools. You can find all of them over at streamlined.fm/425. But that's enough of this preamble. Let's get to the intro and then the interview. Welcome to the Streamlined Solopreneur, a show for busy solopreneurs to help you improve your systems and processes so you can build a business while spending your time the way you want. I know you're busy, so let's get started. All right, I am here with Sarah St. John. She's the host of the Frugalpreneur podcast. Sarah, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. We are putting in a Sisyphusian effort into making this recording happen after technology is just not our thing today. But I'm glad to be talking to you. And that's actually going to be the main subject of our discussion, right? Is how as solopreneurs we're managing the information overload and decision analysis paralysis for tools to help solopreneurs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, we're going to talk about why this process has been a Sisyphusian effort in Streamline Solopreneur Accelerated for members. And you can sign up for that conversation over at streamline.fm/join. But I do want to level set a little bit here. This is not how I normally open interviews, but Sarah, tell us a little bit about your solopreneur journey or business. Like, what do you do and what's your main focus these days?
Yeah. So, my main focus these days is pretty much everything podcasting. And that's what I do now. I have the Frugalpreneur podcast, and then I recently launched a podcast marketing agency and go to a lot of podcast conferences, sometimes speak at them, and I'm all in on podcasting. But basically, my journey started in 2008. I had 6 different jobs that year, not at the same time, but throughout the course of the year. And realized I didn't want to work for somebody else. So I started my entrepreneurial journey, tried a bunch of different like online business models, drop shipping, affiliate marketing, blogging, print on demand. And it was in that process that I discovered like all these free or affordable tools, software to help run an online business on a budget. And so then I decided to write a book in 2019 called Frugalpreneur. And then I launched the podcast, also Frugalpreneur, to coincide with the book. It was just going to be maybe like 10 episodes to kind of help promote the book or like an extra marketing avenue. But I got more leverage and traction with the podcast than the book and love the networking and connections and everything. So what was supposed to be, like a mini series, like a 10 episode type thing, turned into it's now over 5 years going. And now I'm in the podcast industry, and yeah, it took on its own thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so this is great because I did want to just like kind of like authority set for a minute, like what is Sarah doing these days? And so I think the impetus for this conversation, right, was some of the technical issues we were having, but also I asked you what you were using for your website, and then you rattled off like, and again, for people who are relatively new to the show, I was a web developer for 20 years. And so it's very interesting to me what tools people choose. And you ended up rattling off just like a number of different things that you're using, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to talk to you about, first, let's talk about your current tech stack. And when I say tech stack here, I'm going to say like, what are maybe like the top 5 tools you're using to run your business? And then I'll kind of list mine off because there's like so many, right? I guess this is going to be like an affiliate link rich show notes page.
Yeah.
Which I didn't do that on purpose, but it's maybe working out. Hopefully, if the tools you use are affiliate programs I'm a part of, obviously I'll use them, but I'm not going to like go off and sign up for all of them just for this show. So yeah, maybe give me like your top 5 tools that you use to run your business.
Yeah. So, I mean, like for my podcast hosting, I use Captivate.
Okay.
And then I use Descript for a bunch of stuff, editing and transcripts and all that. Let's see. I use system.io. It's like systeme.io for landing pages and sales funnels. I use SendFox for email, TidyCal for calendar booking or scheduling. Let's see. I've recently started using like to create video clips and stuff for social media from like podcast episodes. I've been using both Vizard and Menvo. Menvo was on AppSumo, so I was like, okay, well, yeah, a lifetime deal. And then like for show notes and all that kind of stuff, I use either Cast Magic. Well, that's the main one I use, but I've also been kind of experimenting with Podium and Pod Squeeze. Yeah, this is a lot more than 10, but that's okay.
That's cool. Actually, unless there's like something else, is there something crucial? Yeah.
Oh, my community, my new online community, Amp My Pod, I use the school platform, SKOOL. Yeah, I think that's pretty much summarizes everything.
Nice. So I noticed here, like you mentioned that Menvo was an AppSumo deal. I think you mentioned that system.io in the pre-show was a AppSumo deal.
Oh, no, that one's not an AppSumo.
Oh, that one's not. Okay. You mentioned another landing page builder. That was me. Maybe they were just doing a lifetime deal.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So Go High Level.
Okay.
Well, Click Slow is like a white label version, and they had a lifetime deal, but they're
Okay.
using the Go High Level platform.
I
Anyway,
see.
yeah. And I've used WordPress before, and I've thought about using, I think you recommended, what is that one that's like one page?
Card. Is that right?
Yes, Card. Yeah.
CAARD. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, right there, we just named like 4 or 5 landing page tools, right?
Yeah.
Well, WordPress, it's probably like a gross understatement to call that just a landing page tool.
Right.
And then SendFox, TidyCal, and Cast Magic, I know were also
Those were
AppSumo
AppSumo.
deals. Yeah, I use Cast Magic thanks to the AppSumo deal as well. And so this is one of the main reasons I want to have this conversation, right? I would give a completely different version of the list that you gave, right? So like the things that I think are crucial to my business, right? Podcasting is like a subset of it, right? And so like Riverside certainly is crucial to my business for recording interviews, but like I have an editor who does all the editing. Like the tools that I'm in the most often are Notion, right? That's big project organization. I just got into Obsidian, which I'm using for like general notes and for writing my next book. Ulysses is where I write, even though like the other 2 apps I just mentioned are also for writing. Things I use for task management. And then some of the things that you mentioned here, I use Transistor for hosting this podcast. I don't really use Descript anymore because in the Descript versus Riverside battle, Riverside won for me. I use WordPress for all of my websites because I was a WordPress developer, but I always kind of get the itch to try something else before going, I just know WordPress so well that it's fastest for me there. I use ConvertKit for email. I use Calendly for scheduling. Though Cal.com may usurp Calendly.
Okay, I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've been considering SavvyCal as well because I think that's the nicest interface. And I have a blog post that ranks, it's like Calendly versus SavvyCal is number 1 or 2 under the sponsored posts on Google. It's crazy.
Oh, wow.
But I love that Cal.com has like a bunch of features and it's open source, which like that pushes one of my buttons because it's like, I think like there are people who are like super into AppSumo deals, right? And then there's people who are like super into every tool I use has to be open source because like what happens if they disappear, right? I'm like never like that. I don't want to think about managing my own SaaS tool, right? But the fact that Cal.com like is open source and looks really nice is pretty cool. And then I use Cast Magic and a couple of other things, but I just think it's really interesting, right? We just rattled off like 20 tools.
Yeah. I did forget to mention StreamYard. That's what I've been using.
Okay.
Oh, which, by the way, here's my little...
Nice. Very nice.
StreamYard. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, I got that for free at Podcast Movement.
Nice. That's awesome. Which I will be, this episode's coming out before Podcast Movement. I'll be there in DC this year. Anybody who's listening who wants to say hi. But yeah, so you mentioned StreamYard, and then for streaming, for me, I use Ecamm Live, right? So like, again, so many tools that I want to get into the like this next section of the way that the rest of this episode is going to work, right? Is kind of how do we evaluate how many tools is too many tools? What do you look for, right? I'm a pay for convenience kind of guy. And I think just by virtue of the name of your podcast, you're taking a better approach to bootstrapping a business than I am. So, you know, I'd love to like talk about our philosophies there. How many tools is too many? And then like how we go through the decision-making process for anyone who's listening, right? Because again, if they just heard all of the tools we mentioned, they're like, well, just tell me which one to use. But before we do that, I do want to take a quick break for our sponsors. Look, when you have an online-based business, speed and reliability are the most important aspects of a service. Not far behind that is actually owning the website that your business relies on. When you own your website, you're not subject to an algorithm, changing terms, or accidental shutdowns. That's why I'm so excited that Liquid Web is back as a sponsor of How I Built It this year. Their Cloud VPS is some of the best in-class hosting you can get when your business relies on your website. From speed to security and protection to regular backups, with Liquid Web, you can trust your website will remain in tip-top shape. Not technically savvy? Don't worry. Liquid Web offers fully managed hosting, which means they have a team of knowledgeable experts looking after your website for you, so you can focus on running your business. If you need fast, reliable, and secure hosting for your business, check out Liquid Web. Head over to howibuilt.it/liquidweb today. This episode is sponsored by Clarity. One of my biggest projects as part of the show's rebrand is to organize the website's content. That's over 400 episodes, and I was doing it using a Google Sheet. And if you're overwhelmed by that statement, you should be. But there's a better way. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could conduct a comprehensive content audit in minutes, identify areas for improvement with ease, and finally ditch the content guesswork? Clarity is your secret weapon. It automatically syncs your WordPress data, merges your Google Analytics information, and pulls insights from Google Search Console. It's your new go-to platform for content auditing. With Clarity, you can uncover hidden gems by easily identifying low-performing posts with broken links, missing alt text, or outdated information. You can track progress by monitoring the impact of your optimization efforts. You can see what content is truly resonating with your audience, and you can replicate your success by identifying your top performers and leveraging those insights to fuel future content creation. Imagine the time you'll save. No more combing through endless posts or building complex spreadsheets. Clarity makes content auditing and optimization a breeze. And as a listener of Streamlined Solopreneur, you can sign up for just $1 your first month with the code SOLO2024. That's $1 for your first month with the code SOLO2024. To set up your account, go to streamlined.fm/clarity. That's streamlined.fm/CLARITI. Thanks so much to Clarity for sponsoring the show. And we're back. Okay, so let's get into the first question first. How many tools is too many tools?
Oh, probably 20. No, maybe less than that. I'm a big fan of like tools that have multiple things within it to, like, for example, system.io. I mean, it has a lot of features in it that I actually don't use, like the email marketing calendar or whatever, because I use other tools for it. But I like, it has landing pages, sales funnels, whatever. I like as many things as possible to be under one roof so that you can eliminate a few. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like if it's a platform that, like, okay, so like Go High Level, that's another. I mean, they're both kind of like ClickFunnels, which you're probably more familiar with, but like, I think Go High Level has even more features and stuff. But it's like, okay, they might have 20 or 50 different features and you can eliminate all these other softwares, but they don't always do all the features well. And so sometimes I still prefer, like, I still use TidyCal for my calendar, SendFox for my email, this, that, or the other thing. Like, I know there's a lot of like podcast platforms now, like I think Podcastle, and there's some others.
Yeah.
Where like it has your host, and I think Asha has your hosting and it has just everything podcast related under one roof.
Does the same thing, right?
Yeah. But I'm like, I don't know. I think once you get used to a particular platform for something, like, for example, I use Captivate for my hosting. Like, I can't imagine like switching to a platform that offers hosting and a bunch of other things because I like Captivate so much, or, you know what I mean? It's kind of like at a certain point.
Yeah. In software engineering, we'll call it like technical debt, right? Or there's another theory called the mythical man month, which is the idea that throwing more people at a problem will solve the problem faster, which is not true, right? That's why it's mythical. At some point, you get diminishing returns, right? And I almost see that for these platforms that try to be all in one, right? It's like, let's take Notion, for example. I'm a recent Notion convert, like within the last year. I moved from Airtable. And there are some things I really like about Notion. It's very user-friendly. It's easy to share stuff. It's like notes and a database sort of thing. And while I love and miss Airtable sometimes, Airtable made some decisions at like the company level that bothered me, which is why I ended up jumping ship. But Notion rolled out automations basically right before or right around like when like AI fever hit every software company. And it feels like they abandoned developing their automation tools to develop some AI companion inside Notion. And as a result, we are like Notion's automation tools are more or less useless. Like there's like some features in there that my friend and I legitimately thought for a few minutes about like, what could a possible use case for this be besides just saying it's there? And for people who are listening who use Notion, it's the ability to create a record when another record changes, except the record you create only accepts static data. So like, I can't say if I mark this record as complete, copy the title and the URL into a new record. It's very dumb. Like I had to make a Zapier automation to do what I wanted to do, even though it's basically table stakes. And my whole point of this, right, is like you said, there's a lot of software that tries to be all in one, but they don't do everything well. And so how many tools is too many is really a question of, do the tools you use accomplish the job that you like hired them to do? Right? Like the jobs to be done framework is really an interesting one to me that like I was introduced to again, probably within the last year. Well, I really like dug into it in the last year. I've like heard people say it for a long time. And I just was like, yeah, whatever, jobs to make that feels intuitive, right? But the principle is really good. So I guess the next question is, how many tools is too many? When do you feel like what encourages you, let's say, to look for a new tool?
Oh, man. So I mean, okay, a new tool, like you're already using a tool for something and you're looking for a new tool to use instead of that? Or do you mean like now you have a new need and you're looking for a tool to fit that need?
Okay, so let's do both. Let's yes and this. Let's start with the first one, right? You have a tool that currently fulfills this need. When do you start to look for a new one or a different one?
Yeah, I would say if the tool starts breaking or isn't consistent, and I guess tool meaning software, you know, it's funny because I've experienced so many times where I find something and I'm like, ooh, this is the best software for this thing. And I just love it. But then like a couple months down the line, it's like buggy and breaking and like, you know, and I'm like, oh, great. Now I have to like shop around now for a new tool or whatever. So I would say it's rarely, for me, it's rarely monetary because some people will be like, oh, well, I just need to find a cheaper tool. Well, the thing with me is, most of the tools I use are either free or one-time fees. I do pay monthly for like Descript and
Captivate, I imagine.
Yeah, but a lot of the things I use, I'm either on the free plan or most of them are actually AppSumo one-time deals or whatever.
Right.
And so sometimes like I will buy an AppSumo deal to something and it works great for a while and then it stops working so great. And then they have a different deal for a very similar kind of product. And so then I buy that one and start using that one. And then, yeah, it's kind of, sometimes it's jumping around for just to find something that doesn't break is really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, this is really interesting, right? Because I think I wrote a blog post last year called When Do You Burn Down All of Your Processes and Start Over? Because I was really feeling limitations, and it's like limitations in like the cost, but also in like the tools I was using. And so within like a month of each other, I switched from Airtable to Notion, which cut my costs in half. I switched from Riverside to Squadcast, and we know now that I switched back to Riverside. But like I was already paying for Descript, and so I thought, why not just use Squadcast too? I switched from Todoist to Things 3. This is like, my friends will chuckle because I switch tasks managers like constantly. And I considered switching from Calendly to SavvyCal, which I never pulled the trigger on. And it's because of this like technical debt / level of effort for switching, right? It's like, here's a perfect example. I use Hover for most of my domains that were purchased before 2022. Since then, I've been using Namecheap, and I find that Namecheap is about $3 to $4 less per year for a .com, at least, than Hover is for the same feature set. And so I said to my friend, I'm like, am I going to have to switch all of my domains to Namecheap? And he basically said, I would rather walk on glass than switch 40 domains. Like switch registrar for 40 domains to save $3 per domain, right? Like the pain of switching your domain is so great that I would have to save hundreds of dollars. Because if you've never switched registrars, there's like a 4-step process and then you need to make sure nothing breaks, right? And so like that alone was enough of a deterrent, right? But maybe if I just had one domain with Hover, maybe I would make the switch. Maybe if I had like less than 5 domains, but like almost all of my domains are with Hover. So like it would be a process and then have to time each one to be like close to the expiration. So I'm not paying for like 2 years or whatever. So it's like there's the technical.
I use Namecheap. Sorry.
Namecheap is great. Hover was great. I loved Hover because they were like the first one to recommend or to include Whois Privacy for free without an upsell, right? Now everybody does that. And Hover has been slowly increasing the cost of their domains, which is very frustrating. And like they'll say it's because like the ICANN, whatever that stands for, the people who control the domains are also increasing the price. But like Namecheap is still living up to its name, right? So,
right.
So I find that really interesting, right? I think like you said, like if you're using a tool and it's breaking, or for me, like if it's no longer adequately fulfilling the job, or the cost is worth moving, then like, okay, Calendly, right? I'm looking at cal.com. Cal.com is free. Like it's free for, I think, everything I would need it for. I need to double check that. But like free versus $15 a month, if I could just like drop that into my, I call it the Calendly router, because like I have an automation that's completely based on what event gets filled out. So like if I could just drop cal.com into that, then yeah, I will switch because that's a considerable savings for parity and like for a feature that's like if you have a no-show, like you can charge for no-shows.
Oh, with Cal?
Yeah, with cal.com. Yeah, which is huge. So like, right, like that would be worth the switch for me. So now let's look at the other side of it. You know, we both use copious amounts of tools, like I assume any digital solopreneur these days. When you have, let's say, a new job to be done, right? You have a new thing that you need to do. How do you evaluate, like, is this something that one of my current tools can fulfill? Or do I need to find another one? And where do you usually look for another one? Like, what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, I would see if my current tool would do it, but usually I would know kind of off the top of my head if it does or not. So I'm trying to think of an example of, I don't know, a lot of times I'll just like, I might know of the name of like one type of software that does whatever. And then I'll say, like, I'll do a Google search that says like alternatives to whatever the name of it. And then, so then I can get a good list of like, and I usually don't read the reviews or anything. I just want a list of options. And then I go to those individual websites, compare the pricing and features and all that kind of stuff. And usually, as long as it's something that does what I need it to do, I'll usually pick either something that's, if they have a free plan or whatever the cheapest is. Although a lot of the times I get my software and stuff through AppSumo. So yeah. And sometimes it's like you don't even know that you might need something until you see it on AppSumo.
Yeah. So that's another thing I want to talk about in the pro show. I'm sorry, Accelerated, is our AppSumo graveyards, right? Because I assume you have one. I definitely have one. So yes, I think that'll be like a fun exercise to do for the members. Again, if you want to hear that, streamline.fm/join. But I think this is smart, right? Like you probably know the tools you have. Now, I will say like there have been some times where, have you ever bought a book that you already owned and you didn't realize it?
A couple of times.
Okay. This is why I buy almost all of my books on Amazon, because when I go to the page, it's like, you bought this. And I'm like, oh, right. Did this the other day. Like I'm like, oh, I got to read this book. And I went to buy it and it's like, hey, you bought a version of this book. And I'm like, oh. I feel like, especially if you have one of these all-in-one tools, like you can get into that. Like, okay, I bought So we both use Cast Magic. They just rolled out like a special deal a little while ago for AppSumo customers to increase the maximum number of minutes from 600 to 1,000. And I wasn't going to do that because I don't really use AI tools, but my VA uses it as the starting point for transcribing the episode. So she'll have it transcribed and then she'll go back and correct. And so I hit that limit, I bought it, and then I kind of realized like an idiot that I use Riverside, which creates the transcripts, and now they have Cast Magic integration. I assume it's Cast Magic integration, but it's like there's a button that's like AI generate show notes, and it looks suspiciously like Cast Magic.
Oh.
And so I'm like, oh man, I just spent this money I definitely didn't have to spend. And I think this is like my problem is, I think I said this earlier, I'm happy to pay for convenience. And so if I see something and I'm like, it's money, I'll pay for it. But that gets me into trouble sometimes. So wrapping up here, I want to talk a little bit about tool purchasing philosophy. And since I like to give our listeners takeaways, maybe we can do like a lightning round of like how to pick the right tool. Maybe I'll come up with a real use case for this, right? And say like, oh, okay. Yeah. So, but let's talk tool purchasing philosophies, right? Because I think we have different philosophies here. You said you usually go to AppSumo first. Tell me a little bit about like that, like how you view purchasing a tool and why you go to AppSumo and things like that.
Well, I mean, I go to AppSumo every day. See, it's not usually even me thinking, oh, I need a tool for this. It's more like I go to AppSumo literally every day and I'll sort by newest. So whatever they release like that day or week or whatever. And then if I see something, well, okay, let me use this example. There was something I saw someone use on like a demo of a platform called Dripify, which is like an automatic LinkedIn lead generation type, like
something starting like Wallaxy or
YouTube and I was
Premium, or YouTube Premium, LinkedIn Premium, whatever business Sales Navigator. That's it.
Yeah, but it was like a way to like search for people's profiles with certain keywords or industries or whatever, and then like set up automated like messages and replies and like this whole thing. And I'm like, oh man, this is amazing. But it was like, I don't know, $80 a month or something. And I was like, oh, I wish there was something like this existed like on AppSumo. And then lo and behold, shortly after, an AppSumo deal pops up for a thing called Closely, which basically does the same thing, but it was a one-time deal. So I got that. And now there's also one for something called Canbox, which I might get as well. Because it's like they both do that and they're both one-time fees. So I'm like, I might just get both and try. Because I do a lot of kind of like testing, like trying different tools and seeing. Like right before we got on the call, actually, my most recent episode of Frugalpreneur, I put the video up on YouTube and then I took the YouTube link and put it in both Vizard and Minvo to create like little clips for like reels and stuff. And I put it actually in both to like, I'm going to compare the two. Right. And see what I get. So I like to do a lot of that. But I don't know if that answered the question. I kind of went off the rails there.
Yeah. I mean, so if we were kind of to distill your philosophy, it's almost like if you can get a lifetime deal, you go for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's something that I have either already thought about needing or could see where it would be beneficial. Like one of the lifetime deals I got was called Messenger Bot, which is like an automated Facebook, but I haven't actually used it yet. And then there's several that I've gotten that I haven't actually even used yet, but more like for future, because I'm like, oh, okay, I can see in the future that I might need this. Right. Type thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. Now, do you worry about these products becoming like vaporware, right? Where like one of my biggest concerns, right? And maybe this is just like something I have from being in software is they do the lifetime deal, they grow their user base, and then they're not actually making enough money to do continued support and they disappear. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't yet run into an issue where the company or software has completely disappeared, But I've definitely run into issues where it seems like they aren't as well. And this is where kind of coming back to like software breaking is it seems like they're not maybe keeping it up to date or something is happening to where it's not working as well as it did back when the AppSumo deal was going on. And I would almost think like for a software company who puts a deal on AppSumo and then of course they get a big influx of money at one time, but then it's like, okay, now what's the motivation to like, I don't know. Because then I guess future people, they'd have to charge monthly. Otherwise it wouldn't.
Right. And that's like the thing, right? Like, so AppSumo's whole thing, right, is taking advantage of a really good deal and then also scarcity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people who want Cast Magic today cannot pay like $80 or whatever we paid for it, right? One time, right? Now, for me, because of the worry that I just stated, my philosophy is I am happy to pay for apps that are, or software or tools or whatever, that are truly useful to me as long as they are useful to me, right? And so like, I happily paid $20 a month for Airtable for as long as I could, as long as it made sense, because I was in that app every day, right? And the reason I left is because they added something to their free plan. Like you get a free collaborator on the free plan, but then for every other plan, like you had to pay like per extra user. It was crazy because like it doubled my costs to add my VA when I just set up a free, like a separate free plan that she was able to use, right? It was like things like that. And some of the change, like they limited some of the features, right? You could tell that they were trying to figure out how to make more money without necessarily raising the plan for raising the price for everybody across the board. And I would have much rather they did that because I felt like they were screwing the people who were there the longest. And so I moved to Notion. I cut my cost in half because the other thing is like my VA didn't need access to my entire Airtable date, like all of my Airtable stuff. She needed access to 2, maybe 3 tables. And so like with Notion, you can give access on a per database basis for free up to I think like 100 accesses, right? And so like, yeah, if my VA needs access to 100 databases, I'll add her. I'll pay for her to be in the but she only needs access to 3. And I'm glad that I'm not doubling my cost for that, right? So, but I am happy to support the tools that I find most crucial to me. That said, like I think if Cast Magic didn't have a lifetime deal, I would not use any of those AI tools because I don't, and I had Greg Wasserman on the show a couple weeks ago when we talked about this. I didn't say this to him point blank because I'm not like rude to my guests, but I don't find, and this is not just a Cast Magic thing either, I don't find the output for those tools particularly useful for like production ready copy, right? What I do find them useful for is surfacing clips or highlighting things that maybe I forgot about in the conversation. But the pain point for me is not so great that I'd be willing to pay $50-$60 a month for it, right?
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, I'd be paying for CapShow. Like I think CapShow is probably the best tool out there. Deidre Shen's a friend, but I definitely don't use those tools. Whereas like ConvertKit, I'm in every day and I use that to sell and make money. And so like, yes, I pay whatever it is for me right now, right? Hundreds of dollars a year for that. My list is not so big that it's thousands of dollars yet. And then the same thing with Transistor. I think Transistor is expensive, right? Like I think for Captivate at $20 a month, you get what I get at Transistor for $50 a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I hopped on Transistor last year before I kind of teamed up with RSS.com as an evangelist for them. And Transistor offers dynamic ads. And they offered it at that time and then private podcast feeds. But if I was comparing, if I was looking to jump ship again, knowing that RSS.com doesn't have those 2 features, I'd probably actually go to Captivate because it's, again, that's like 50% savings for me. Is the technical debt worth it though?
Yeah. Well, and I also like with Captivate, and maybe Transistor does this, is that you can have multiple podcasts under one plan. So you don't have to pay per podcast.
Yes, Transistor does do that.
Okay.
And so like that allowed me to consolidate because I had like Castos, which became not very good. Like things started breaking. And then I was on Buzzsprout for one show and I was able to consolidate to just Transistor, right? But again, like RSS.com gives you all of that for like $15 a month. the feature that I would need, and maybe if I was starting again today, I would like have my shows on rss.com and just pay for like either Supercast or Hello Audio for the private feeds. But like, I know that I am spending more than I need to with Transistor, and I'm trying to make a determination on whether or not it's worth moving. And that's the hard part.
I feel like as far as, well, in my opinion, when it comes to software switching, the one that I'm the most hesitant about would be podcast hosting, just because so much crap could happen with switching the feed.
Right. And I did that in the year 2023. Right. And as we record, it's 2024. Do I really want to do that twice in less than 2 years? Not really. Because like, yeah, you could set up a feed forward, but like I'll be honest, like I didn't trust Castos to keep that forward around. Right. Like when I moved from Castos to Transistor, I didn't trust Castos to keep that forward around. So like I had the forward and then I went in and like manually changed in Apple Podcasts and Spotify and anywhere else I thought about. So like that's a tough thing to consider, right? So it would have to be very compelling for me to want to change again so close to the last time I changed.
Yeah, I've only changed once because when I first started podcasting in 2019, I was on Spreaker. Because I believe at that time they had a free plan. But then once it was getting to the point where, but I think it was only free up to a certain number of episodes or something. And so then once it got up to the point where I was going to, I think I did do the paid plan after that, which was like, I don't know, $7 a month or something. But anyway, I ultimately switched to Captivate. And I want to say that was probably 2020 and have stuck with them ever since. And anytime I hear of another podcast host that sounds interesting because they include all these other features or whatever, I'm just like, okay, yeah, I don't want to do the RSS feed switcheroo again, because there were some kind of issues, but they all got taken care of. But now being 5 years in and 250 episodes, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to mess with it.
Right. Yeah. I was originally on Libsyn. So I've done 2 moves now, right? I was originally on Libsyn, and then as everybody who's been podcasting before 2016 or 2012 who was on Libsyn, they make the move, right? Or most people do at least. I moved to Castos and like they were like, yeah, well, we'll help. And I should have known, right? Because that was a little bumpy. The feed was a little bit bumpy. And so I was really hesitant again, but again, like things started breaking at Castos. And so I moved to Transistor and that was a very smooth import. I was pretty impressed. And they were even able to import like my private feed, which they usually don't do, but like Justin got in support and like helped me. And so like I was pretty impressed there, right? But so it's not, I guess it's not just a cost thing, right? So as we kind of wrap up here, the main show at least, let's pick something super relevant here. Do you use any of the, what are they called? Like ChatGPT or Claude or any of those where you can like talk to an AI and get it to do stuff for you?
Yeah, I use ChatGPT here and there. And then Cast Magic does have like a chat kind of where you could be more specific about the prompts and what you want them to do. Yeah. But yeah, because most of my AI stuff I get through Cast Magic. But if I'll use ChatGPT for things that are like maybe not podcast related, because like all my podcast stuff then goes through Cast Magic. But if it's like something else, then I use ChatGPT. Okay.
And so how did you land on ChatGPT, right? Because did you just like pick that because everyone was using it? Or like, did you try a couple and like, this is the best? Because like, there's a lot of variety out there now, a lot of flavors of these like conversational chat bot things or AI bot things.
Yeah, I mean, I think because it was, I don't know if it was the first one, but the first biggest one that I had heard of, and everybody was talking about it and everyone I knew used it. And so that's what I tried. And I actually haven't really tried any others, which normally I do try other things. But I'm not like a huge AI person in general. It's more like I'll do it if I'm like stuck or like need to get something done quickly or something like that. And I'm just on the free version of ChatGPT. Everyone tells me I need to upgrade to the $20 a month version, but I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a toughie, right? I was paying for the $20 a month version, but I found, like, as you alluded to, like, I felt that, I mean, and they just, as we record this, they recently released the ChatGPT 4, oh shoot, we're going to get sued by Scarlett Johansson version.
Wait, what does Scarlett Johansson have to do with it?
Oh my gosh, have you not seen this? This is crazy.
No.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in Accelerated too.
Okay.
So if you don't know what I'm talking about, my friends, streamline.fm/join. So they just rolled out the latest version, but I felt like it was degrading, and I'm already like a snob about, like, I am bullish on ChatGPT cannot write for you. If you write mostly by prompting ChatGPT or some other AI, you're not writing, like, you don't care about your writing. But at CEX, I was compelled to try to make a digital doppelganger. Andrew Davis was a speaker, and that's what he called it. And I found Perplexity Pro, which was recommended to me by like another tool I use called Raycast. And the thing I like about Perplexity Pro is that it plugs into multiple different AI tools. So it plugs into Claude and ChatGPT and its own version of AI. But Claude is very good for writing. And so it's kind of like a supercharged tool that I assume is leveraging economies of scale, because it's also $20 a month, but Claude separately is $20 a month and ChatGPT separately is $20 a month. So I assume they're saving money on the API and charging for the interface and the additional tools. But yeah, I'll put these through the ringer. I will pay $20 for 1 month just to see like how much I use it. And Perplexity Pro has been really good because it's versatile. I can basically say, oh, rewrite this answer using a different AI model. So I think that's really interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say to our listeners, right? If you're like trying to figure out a tool, when I hired my VA, I basically sent the same job to 4 or 5 VAs and determined which one did it best. I think you probably want to do that with your tools too, right? Like have a list of non-negotiable things that the tool has to do, and then try a couple and see which one does it best.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do that quite a bit as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Sarah, this has been great. We're going to have an extra long Streamline Solopreneur Accelerated. I'm experimenting with trying to make those closer to half and half. So we'll see what the feedback is like. But I did want to deliver a full conversation, which I think we did here. Sarah, if people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so Frugalpreneur, any podcast app, you should be able to find it. Or you can just go to the website, which is frugal.show. And then if you have a podcast yourself, and are looking for a community about marketing and growing it, ampmypod.com is the free community, and podcastmarketing.agency is the done-for-you services.
Awesome. And I will link to that and everything mentioned here. It's going to be a link-rich show notes over at streamlined.fm/425. That's streamlined.fm/425. for episode 425. Sarah, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening. Thanks to our sponsors. And until next time, I'll see you out there.